So, so when they asked me to lead this Sunday's sessions, it's like, well, I didn't have much advance warning, but I'm not sure that would have helped anyway. But nevertheless, so I thought, okay, what can I speak about that would be that is helpful to me and helpful to others, right? And so I thought about so I lead a small group in Carborough, which is where I live, and once a week. And so last week, yeah, no, the week before last, someone asked, um, so we talk about, and this is true here too. We talk about karma, and we talk about refuge, and we talk about this, and we talk about that, and many different things, right, in Buddhism. But what does it really, not what does it really mean, but he asked, how do you act, what do you do, right? How do you actually live, or how do you put it into practice, right? And because there's lots of different, we do lots of rituals, we do Tara prayers, and we do Tara practices, and you may have other practices that you do for those of you who have been given instruction, and so forth and so on, right? But what does it boil down to? And so I thought about it, and so at the time, so this is so I looked it up, or I was just reading this book. This is His Holiness's book on commentary on Shantideva's text. It's called A Flash of Lightning in the Dark of Night. And I was reading it, and he quoted from he doesn't say it in here, but this is where it comes from. He quoted from the Diamond Cutter Sutra, one of the great sutras of Buddha's teachings. And so basically boils it down to three things, right? The Buddha says, abandon evil doing, practice virtue well, subdue your mind. This is the Buddha's teaching. So that's really what it boils down to. Abandon evil doing, practice virtue well, subdue your mind. And all the other things that we do are basically implementation, if you will, right, of these three things. It's just a way of getting at these three things. But this is really, if we're on the path, I don't know if this is, this is probably true for all spiritual paths, but the Buddha's path has particular ways of implementing it, right? So, so I thought, I thought that was really, if you think about it, it's really profound. Not just because the Buddha said it, but because why he said it in the first place, right? So, so abandon evil doing. So so before we go there, so there's so the Buddha talked about the Four Noble Truths, for example, right? When his first teachings, the first turning of the wheel, right? The truth of suffering, the cause of suffering, the cessation of suffering, that there is a truth of cessation of suffering, that there is such a thing, that you can cease your suffering, right? Which is not always obvious. And then finally, the path to the cessation, right? Which he enumerated with the Eightfold Path and so forth and so on, right? Right livelihood, right effort, right concentration, right wisdom, right, etc. Many other, and four other right things, right? So this is, so if you think about abandon evil doing, perform virtue well, and subdue your mind, all of his teachings, all the, they say the 84,000 teachings that he gave through his 45 years, 45. I actually calculated that out the other day. It comes to around 3 or 4 teachings a day, which is actually not unreasonable if you have, you think 84,000, that can't be right, But over 45 years, it comes to around 3 or 4 or maybe 5 a day, right? Which you're living with monks your whole day, and nuns. And so, that's not anyway, okay. Aside there. Um so um so yeah, so all of his teachings, all of those 84,000 teachings, which you'll find in the sutras, are covered in these three lines. And so that's one thing that makes it really profound. And so we just have to think about it deeply, right? We have to investigate and think about it deeply. And so if you think about it one at a time, for example, if you take abandoned evil doing, right? So why is that? I mean, why not? Why can't we just live our lives um, essentially on autopilot, right? With doing whatever we feel like, whenever we feel like it. And so, I was so this reminded me of this. I don't know where I read this. An analogy, right? So, if our minds are, if it's like the blue sky, for example, right? And we have delusions, right? We're not able. What are we trying to achieve? We're trying to achieve this clear, unadulterated potential, right? Which you can think about it like the blue sky, which we all have, right? We all have the Buddha nature in us, the Buddha potential in us, right? It's not like we're just so bad that we don't have any hope. No matter what existence we take, whether as a human or an animal or an insect and so forth and so on. So each of us has this potential of the blue sky. It just so happens that we have these obstructions, obstacles, or delusions, obscurations, right? And those obscurations are not permanent, right? We can remove them. That's the beauty of the path, right? They may appear permanent to us, but the more we see, the more we investigate, we find that is not the case. It says, I think it says somewhere, and it says qualities are innate, stains are adventitious, right? So our qualities that we have, the Buddha potential, that's innate. Right? We all have it from the beginningless time until whatever, at the end, of, until enlightenment. But the stains that we have they're like, stains on a cloth, right? They can be taken away, right? So that's the delusions that we have in our mind. And so if the blue skies are potential, then the clouds are like those delusions, right? Clouds come, clouds go. And that's just how our delusions are. Our present set of emotions, a present set of angry thoughts, present set of whatever we're going through, right, in our minds, are like those clouds. And so if our minds are if our minds are always, if we are always acting in such a way that increases the cloudiness in our minds, right, then we keep putting extra obstacles in our way, right, to realize that potential. And that's where abandoned evil doing comes in, right? The more if you think about the cause and effect, right? The more we, the more we engage in non-virtuous actions, the more we increase the cloudiness. And so the farther our attainment becomes. And the other thing to remember is that, if to realize anything, right? Whether it's in our work and our education or whatever, we have to have, in some ways, clear minds, right? I mean, we can't study, for example, in college if our minds are filled with junk, right? Or we can't think at work if if you can think about it, if you're having trouble at home, for example, if you're facing some great difficulty, if you're constantly, our thoughts are churning, right? We can't concentrate at work, right? Or whatever we're trying to do. So it's clear that our minds have to be somewhat clear for us to be able to make anything happen, right? So evil doing basically increases that we don't get it. It makes the clarity. We cannot achieve the clarity, right? Because we're continuously adding extra negative energy, negative emotions, negative thoughts, all those things in our mind stream, right? So that's the basis of the Buddhist path, that we can't realize our goal without actually being aware or being very, very cognizant of each of our actions, right? So whenever we engage in any action of mind, and body, speech, and mind, right? No, actions aren't just things we do, but things we say, things we think, attitudes we have, right? So those are, we have to be clear, right, of why we are doing something. We have to think why we're doing it at all times. And if we can make it be of benefit, then it's always a positive action, right? So I was just thinking that it was something that Geshe-la usually says that came to my mind, but then it just disappeared. Yeah. Anyway, so so that's why abandon, the first, the three higher trainings, or rather the three principal aspects of the path, they say, right, as ethics, actually three higher trainings: ethics, concentration, and wisdom. The first thing is ethics, right? And it's also one of the, I think it's the first one in the six perfections, for example, right? Or maybe generosity is the first one. I can't remember. But in any case, ethics is one of the six perfections, right? So that's why it's so important, because it has to be the basis. If we don't have ethical behavior, we can't attain anything, right? Or it just gets farther and farther away. And we continuously reap the negative results, right? And then it says, practice virtue well. And when I first read it, I said, oh, I'll practice virtue. That makes sense, right? I mean, it's just the opposite of abandon evil doing. What's so special about it? But then I noticed that it doesn't say practice virtue. It says practice virtue well, right? And so the question is, how does one practice virtue? To make it to get the most out of it, right? And why practice virtue, and how to practice virtue, right? So, this goes back to the teachings on cause and effect and karma, right? Which is that we have to, if we want to have a nice garden, we have to plant seeds, right? But before we plant seeds, we have to put some fertilizer, maybe put some, special soil, get some good mulch and so forth and so on. We have to rake to get the rocks out of the way. We have to make sure it has water and sunlight and so forth and so on. Only then will the seeds mature. right? And become flowers or plants, whatever we're trying to grow. And even if we put the seeds in the ground and don't do all the other things, it's not going to make any difference, right? The seeds are not going to sprout. So all those other things are necessary, right? So virtue is like that, right? Virtue is the kind of the ground on which the seeds can sprout. They call it accumulation of merit, right? The two great accumulations of merit and wisdom. Merit being one of them, which comes from practicing virtue. So we can abandon evil doing, but we still have to actually create. So abandon evil doing is, moving all the rocks and so forth and so on, right? So which is important. We have to do that, right? But we also have to practice virtue by putting this, putting the seeds in the ground, by watering it, and so forth and so on, right? Only then can it flower. And then it says practice virtue well. So that's when I started with karma, right? So we have, if we do negative actions, we reap negative results, right? It's kind of like the Buddha put it. Nobody's trying to punish us, right? Nobody's trying to punish us. It's a natural law as it's kind of presented. It's like gravity. It's like whatever you can think of, right? Newton's first law. It's like that. So it doesn't discriminate between Buddhists and non-Buddhists, between cultures, between creeds, none of that, right? It's just how it is. Whether we're here on Earth or whether we're someplace else in the universe, it's still going to be the same. That's how it's presented. So we do non-virtue, we have negative results that happen. We practice virtue, and we have positive things that happen. For example, the fact that we're here today, for the fact that we are born in this country, or at least live in this country, the fact that we have decent lives with a roof over our heads and so forth and so on. We have practiced incredible virtue in the past, right, to be where we are today. So like that, right? So we have to continue to practice virtue, to sow the seeds, and water it, like that, so that we can continue to have positive lives and be able to continue practicing, right, to attain our goals. So that's practicing virtue, and then it says practicing virtue well, right? So it's not enough to just, so that's where the whole idea of bodhicitta, compassion, etc., comes in, right? We have to, it's the attitude. Actually, I was reading this, and in Rinpoche's book, he quotes from one of Lama Tsongkhapa's teachings. He says, white and black actions, so Lama Tsongkhapa wrote this, white and black actions depend on good and bad thoughts. If you have good thoughts, even the paths and the grounds are good. If you have bad thoughts, even the paths and grounds are bad. Everything depends on your attitude. So, what does our attitude need to be, right? So what we're taught, what the teachers tell us, is that at all times, no matter what we are thinking, doing, speaking, right, we have to see whether those actions are benefiting others or not, right? The idea is that at all times we have to think about helping others, even when we are going through we're in the depths of our worst fears or worst nightmares or whatever it happens to be. Because it turns out that if we're able to think of others, even when we're suffering the most, it lightens our load. We're able to get ourselves out of our own depressions and our own, um, I don't want to say little worlds, but it is kind of like that. I am certainly, you know, um, tied up in my own little world, right? And so if we're able to rise out of that, then if we're able to see that others are facing similar situations, there are 6 billion people in this world, right? So somebody else must be going through something similar to what I'm going through. And so how difficult it must be for them. So if we're able to if we're able to take whatever action we're taking, thinking of those others who are facing similar situations, may they be able to, may this be of benefit to them. Even, we don't know how it's going to be of benefit, but that attitude, right? That attitude is what Lama Tsongkhapa is saying here. That attitude is what makes the virtue virtuous, right? And that attitude is of incredible potential. That attitude is, we don't know. We think that, well, how would that be of any, how would that change anything, right? And the interesting thing is that attitude by itself actually changes the way we perceive, right? Actually, this reminds. So there's a great one of the patron saints of France, Sainte Therese of Lisieux. She along with Joan of Arc, I think, are the two patron saints of France. And she had this, I'll make this long story short, but basically, she entered the convent when she was 16, maybe, I think, and she died when she was 24. I think she had TB. But anyway, and you can imagine, she goes into this convent, she's 16, and she basically is among a group of women she has never been around, right? She has no control over who, who she can choose as friends or so forth and so on. But basically, she's given her situation, right? I think her sister used to be she was the mother superior to her, something like that. I can't remember. But and so she would, she'd be in prayer, right, 3 or 4 times a day, and there was this nun in front of her who, while they were doing their prayers and their meditations, she would, I don't know, something with her tongue, she would click, right? She would click with her tongue or with the teeth or something like that. There'd be a noise, and it was just grating to her. She couldn't. It was just one of those things that just got on her nerves, right? And so over time she realized that, well, there's nothing she can do about it, right? I mean, there's nothing. She can't move someplace else. I mean, she can't go someplace else. She can't, so she's basically stuck in her situation. So she can do one of two things. She can either just continue to just be miserable, or she could do something about it, right? And so what she did was she basically decided to change her attitude, right? And so she just decided to just be kind to her. Like, what she would make presents for her. She would, even though she didn't feel it, right? I mean, she didn't feel particularly nice to her, right? But she would make presents for her. She would say kind words to her. She would bring her tea, or I don't know if they drank tea, but whatever whatever they drank, she would bring water and so forth and so on, like that, right? She continuously to just be kind. And it's interesting, over time, her attitude changed, right? And so she didn't hear the clicks anymore. That was a funny thing. She said that she doesn't remember whether the clicks were still happening, or did the clicks go away, or she just didn't, she just wasn't, she didn't just hear them anymore, right? But it's like that. right? So she changed, like Shantideva said in his Bodhisattva, the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, you can try to, if the earth is full of rocks and we have to walk on it, we can either try to cover the entire earth with leather or we can put shoes on, right? So that's that's the thing that Saint Therese, um, that realization that she had, right? And we have those moments all the time, right? And so if we're able to find ways of being of benefit, right? Thinking of others, it can change our essentially our world, right? And this idea of bodhicitta is incredible. That's the bodhicitta is this actually it's bodhicitta is great. So there we have this this attitude of whatever we're doing may be of benefit, right? It may not be of immediate benefit, right? But we have to generate that attitude because attitude is what changes in action from virtue to non-virtue, right? So Rinpoche, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, our teacher, one of his advice to all his students, right, and his advice to me many many years ago, and this the same advice he gives to everyone, is that when you get up in the morning, the first thing you think, right? There's two things he says. First thing you think is how wonderful that I have another day, right? Because it wasn't guaranteed. It isn't guaranteed ever, right? So how wonderful that I have another day. And the second thing he says to think is, whatever I do, may it be of benefit to others, right? Maybe we'll do the right thing. More often than not, we will probably fail, right? Because we're human, right? But if we are able to generate that attitude at all times, chances are we will do the right thing more often than not, right? And so that's why that attitude makes all the difference, is because we start from a ground that's fertile, right? If the ground isn't fertile, nothing's going to grow, no matter how much rain there is and how much sun there is and how many seeds there are, et cetera, right? So we start with a fertile ground if we are able to have that attitude just in the beginning, right? And if we're able to remind ourselves during the day, then, well, that's even better, right? So that's the idea of being of benefit. And then it goes even further, right? The bodhisattvas, the great beings who are on their way to becoming like Buddhas, like the great beings like Rinpoche, like His Holiness Dalai Lama, well, they're probably Buddhas anyway, but I'm just giving examples of great beings in our lifetime, right? Geshe-la uses the example of Mother Teresa, for example, who must have been at least a great bodhisattva, right? So those beings, and you don't have to be Buddhist, right, to be being a bodhisattva. So those beings, they go one step further. They basically say that they take on the responsibility of bringing all others to happiness, right? The ultimate happiness. Now, so it's not just I'll be of benefit, right? It's that I will take on the responsibility, right? I will be the one, right, to help these people be the great, find that blue sky, right? That clarity, that full potential. And I will help them, right? So that's what was behind Mother Teresa's every action, right? I mean, she basically picked up, I grew up in Calcutta, and my school was affiliated with Mother Teresa's charity, right? They were one of their benefactors. And so she basically picked up children and people who nobody, they were the dregs of society, if you will, right? They were just living on the streets. They knew, it was really pathetic situations, right? So, and she treated every one of them with such extreme kindness, right? Like each of them were just as important as the richest, most powerful, the most beautiful person on this planet, right? Just that's how she treated them, right? And so that's the kind of attitude that we all aspire to, right? But maybe we can't generate, maybe we mouth the words right now, but we can't, we try to generate that attitude, but it's not all that, we don't feel it's all that real, right? But if we're able to always, at least in our own way, if we just say, okay, whatever action I can be of benefit, right? That's working towards that goal, right? In our little ways, we are making step-by-step progress, right? Step by step, we work towards that goal. Um, so actually, yesterday, someone asked me, how can, if we have done so many, I'm kind of digressing here a little bit. If we've done so many terrible things in the past, or bad things in the past, whatever it is, and we've created so much negative karma, right? And they say that karma is definite, which means that we will reap the negative as a consequences, right? How can anything? And this person isn't Buddhist, right? So they're not necessarily doing. They're interested in Buddhism, but not necessarily doing purification practices and so forth and so on. And so she asked, how can, what's the point of it, right? If I'm gonna reap all this negative consequences, why even bother, right? And so I said that well, there's these things called purification practice, etc. But then I realized one of the greatest, one of the teachings is one of the greatest ways to purify or to stop negative, just remove the negative obscuration that we create, the seeds that we create through our negative actions, right? Is to practice kindness, compassion, right? And so I just said, that's the teaching, right? But then I thought I'd look it up, right? Because it's important to, to kind of. So I looked it up this morning, right? And this is what Geshe Sopa says in his commentary in the Lamrim, right? Those of you who know. He says, so this paragraph says, bodhicitta, which we just spoke about, right? Bodhicitta also burns up enormous amounts of negative karma in an instant. It is a powerful purification because it is the very opposite of harmful action. All negative actions involve harming others. Out of attachment and selfishness, we become angry with others, take their lives, hurt them, steal their property, cheat them, lie to them, and so on. Negative karma, like deliberately killing your parents or an arhat, has consequences that are long-lasting and deep-seated obstacles to emancipation. What could overcome this hindrance other than vowing to take responsibility to eliminate others' suffering? When a desire purely to benefit all others, not just your relatives and friends, is spontaneous, everything you do creates great merit and destroys prior negative actions. Not only that, bodhicitta causes small merit created in the past to become enormous, merit that had degenerated to become never-ending, and large merits to become inexhaustible. Right? So even though we may make those, you may say, we may say, may this be of benefit, right? It's not just a little thing that we're doing, right? It has enormous consequences. And that's why Rinpoche gives that advice to all his students, right? Because his goal is to basically benefit all of us, right? Not just his students, certainly everyone, but but certainly to his students. That's why he says to always have that correct motivation. The first thing we do, we get up in the morning, we think about that, right? Because that little attitude just builds up, just has immense positive consequences over our lifetimes, right? Not just this lifetime, but all the future lifetimes, right? So, so that's why it says practice virtue well, right? We have to see, we have to all, the virtue has to, it has to be attendant um, with the positive thought, right? And then it says, subdue your mind. I ran out of time, but subdue your mind, right? And ultimately what that's speaking to is basically being one with the blue sky, right? To pacify our minds, to realize our true potential, right? Because when you lie down on the ground and you look up at the sky, if you say, describe the sky, or tell me what you see, most of us will say, I see this cloud up there, I see this is what the cloud looks like, and so forth and so on, right? But what we don't see is the blue sky. Nobody says what the sky is like, right? But those who are, uh, have reached their goals, right? Our goal is to be one with the blue sky, to be able to be just that, right? And from which comes all the other things just rise out of it. All of our actions rise out of it, right? So that's what the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are like that blue sky. They're beyond all these conceptual thoughts that we have, all our little this and that. We like our friends and relatives and our loved ones. We dislike those who are unkind to us, and so forth and so on, right? For them, everyone is the same, right? Like they say, like the scriptures say, the Buddhas see everyone as beautiful. Not physically beautiful, but beautiful from the inside, right? That's the quality of one of the many qualities, right? If you study grounds and the paths, it's one of the qualities of the Buddhas, right? Is that, I'm sorry, not the body, the sublime continuum. One of the qualities is that he or she thinks everyone is beautiful, right? And that's what arises out of the blue sky. And if we're able to attain that, that's how we are like. So we have the potential. So the Buddhism isn't difficult. I mean, our teachers give us these practices to do, and a lot of us get, we've got so many things to do, or whatever it is, we feel overwhelmed, or I wonder at times, right? Why am I doing this? What benefit does it really, what difference is it really making? Right? Every once in a while I will have that thought, right? What difference is it really making? But what it does is that it's basically working towards these three things, right? If we follow our teachers, we automatically abandon evil doing. Right? That's one of the great qualities of having a spiritual teacher, is you automatically abandon evil doing. There's a lot of those, so a lot of the benefits. If you really study the benefits of having a teacher, that's one of the benefits, right? So abandoning evil doing, right? If we follow, if we are doing those practices of compassion, doing some of those Thara practices, if we're following Rinpoche's advice of of generating the motivation in the morning, etc. All those things is what practicing virtue well comes to, right? And then finally, generating wisdom is subduing our minds. So Buddhism isn't difficult if we remember why we're just the basics, right? And we don't have to. And Geshe-la himself says, we don't have to do all these rituals, all these things. That's not the important thing, right? The important thing is to do these three things. If we're able to do these three things, we will get there. Our lives will be better. Our relationships will be better. we will be happy, or and so forth and so on, right? So anyway, I think I used up more of my time that I wanted to. Did anybody have any questions? That I know that Dawn last week, I was very interested to find out if Dawn last week talked about what I don't like about the Dharma. So I wasn't quite. So I was interested to find out if anybody had any thoughts about that. But anyway, but anybody have any, if if you have any questions, you can ask me. I'll try to answer. Yes. Oh, sorry. We only have a couple of minutes, but yeah, I wanted to stop earlier.
No, about practicing the change of attitude. Um,
Oh,
what Geshe-la a few times a few weeks ago was explaining the Om Mani Padme Hum,
yes.
and one of the syllables, I have it written down at home, I can't remember which one, is happy to do,
Yeah.
joyous effort.
Joyous
And
effort.
when I start grousing about, oh, I gotta go get that, will just, I can see him and hear that happy to do, and it really
Right.
makes a huge difference.
Yes.
Just something simple like that.
Yes.
And that was
And being able to remember.
observation.
No, that's wonderful, right? Being able to remember, it's kind of like, what would Jesus do? Like those signs, right? I mean, Jesus would probably do the same things that the Buddha would do. I always think about, okay, what would my teacher do here, right? Or what would he suggest, right? And so that's that always goes through my mind. So like that, right? Joyous effort is what came to your mind. So like that, I always think about, okay, what would he do, right? Or what would he suggest? And it's almost always not what I'm doing currently. In any case, if that's it, then let's just finish with our prayers. So we'll do on the pink sheet the dedication verses for Master Shantideva and all the ones after that. And one of the things, if you could, one of the great, great, great Tibetan masters, Geshe Lungdup Sopa, who I consider one of my gurus, he died at the age of 92 on Thursday. And so if we could dedicate whatever prayers we're making to that may he reach the clear light, and may he come back to be with us again soon, so that he can continue teaching us and being of such incredible benefit again to all his students and all those he comes to be with. So yeah. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled, with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food, may the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness, and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid, and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All-powerful Chenrezig Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. Savior of the snow land teachings and transmigratory beings, who extensively clarifies the path that unifies emptiness and compassion. To the lotus in the hand, Lord Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be fulfilled. The one who mastered his speech at a very young age, the one with great patience who received the name Avatare, the one with great precision who spread the teachings of Lama Tsongkhapa on bliss and void, Lama ornament of the yellow hat tradition, please remain until samsara ends. You who uphold a subduer's moral way, who serve as a bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, spreading Manjunat's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplished magnificent prayers honoring the three jewels. Savior of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long. And we'll finish by doing 7 Tara mantras for Geshe-la's safe travels, long, happy life, and his return. Maybe someone can start a Tara mantra because I know a different tune. I will start with the wrong tune. Tare tu re so ha. Om 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 tare tu re so ha. Thank you for coming. Hope you have a good weekend. usually sit over there, so I'm used to a particular routine, but now that I'm sitting here, I forgot about the routine. So you can do prostrations in your mind. So hello. So um, so we'll get started. My name is Shanka Mitra. While Geshe-la is away, or a few of us, along with Robbie and Don and Venerable Chukyi, I guess, we're kind of substituting, a poor substitute, if you will, for Geshe-la. Extremely poor substitute. In any case, if you're here today and you have never come to Geshe-la's teachings, then I strongly encourage you to come when he does return, rather than creating the first impression from me. He'll be back, I think, in December, maybe November, late November sometime. So okay, so we'll get started with our normal procedure. So we'll do the prayers on the peach colored sheet, whatever, yeah, beige colored sheet. And so we'll do the Shakyamuni Buddha's mantra and then the four immeasurables in English and Tibetan. And then we'll do some meditations, and then we'll talk a little bit, and then we'll end. So like that. So before we start, let's generate a mind as best as we can, or whatever we know, generate a mind of refuge, that we are here to think, listen, meditate on the Buddha's teachings, on the qualities of the Buddhas, the qualities that we aspire to, the validity of their teachings. So like that. Da Om Mune Mune Maha Mune Soha Ayata Om Mune Mune Maha Mune Soha Dayata Om Mune Mune Maha Mune Soha. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. So let's hear, before we do the Tibetan chant, let's remember that all of us in our lives, we have difficulties, disappointments, expectations that don't come to fruition. So we're not the only ones. So there's many, many people, animals, all those beings around us who have the same difficulties in their lives. So that we have an attitude, we generate an attitude in our minds that we can be even though we're working for our own benefit, that we can at all times be working for others' benefit as well in whatever we say, think, or do. So with that, Sem Chem Tam Che De Wada Dewe Gyudan Den Par Gyurshi Dung Nang Du gyushi. Dung me be wa mi wa gyushi. Yering chagan nidang relwe danyo lane Vagyushi. Oh yes, thank you. So while the children are here, as Geshe-la says, the children's minds are much clearer than ours. They're less, I don't know, uh, less stuff in them. So they're much closer to the minds that we hope to have one day. In any case, so it's beneficial to have the children and us do these prayers together. So we do the 8 Chenrei Zigs and 7 Tara mantras. Om Mani Padme Hum. 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 I forgot to say that the prayers, for those of you who don't know them, or the mantras, are at the bottom of the pink sheet. So we'll do green Tara's mantra. Do dare do re so ha. Om 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 dare do re so ha. He's he's ready. Okay, the children can go. So maybe we can get started by doing a couple of meditations as we normally do with Geshe-la. So we'll start with the 9-round breathing meditation. Those of you who haven't been here before, it's basically meditation to clear out the imbalances of energy in our body and mind stream. So to engage in any practice like concentration meditation, we have to first make our minds calm and stable. And so the 9-round breathing meditation is just to develop that, or just to bring that about. So yeah, So what we do is we start with our, let's say we close off our left nostril, we breathe through our right, and then we close off our left and breathe out like that, right? So in through our right, out through our left 3 times, and then in through our left, out through our right 3 times, and then in through both our nostrils and out 3 times, like that. And so that basically, there's many challenge, but there are 2 or 3 channels in our central nervous system that it kind of works the energy out of it, or the imbalance of it. Um, the most important thing, as with all meditation, is to have a straight back, but comfortable, right? So because that actually helps with the flow of energy. So we'll start with our right nostril. Now our left. Now both the nostrils. Yeah. And then we'll do a short, maybe for 15 minutes, we'll just do a short concentration meditation by breathing, by using the breath as our object. So, so basic. It's a very simple meditation. But extremely profound, as we find out as we continue with the practice. Um, so it's simple because we have the breath. We're intimately familiar with it. We always breathe. We don't have to do anything special, learn anything new. But basically, all we need to do is just um, keep our minds focused on the breath. And there's many ways to do that. For example, as we breathe in and out, we just be present with the sensations, the in-breath, the out-breath, so forth and so on, or the tummy moving in and out, for example. Sometimes that works better. Sometimes just the feeling at the tip of the nostril, like that. However it works best for you, right? So, and you'll find that your mind strays. That's the nature or the function of our minds, is to have thoughts, and so it'll stray. If it does, or rather when it does, we basically bring our minds just gently, without judgment, without any extra thoughts, we just bring our minds gently back to the breath. And we just do it over and over again, like that. Um, if you get tired, or if you're feeling that you can't do it, if you're feeling tired of being able to concentrate, then you can take a break by just relaxing your mind, and then maybe a minute or two later come back to it, like that. Okay. So before I start, um, some of you may know one of the great remaining Buddhist, Tibetan Buddhist teachers from Old Tibet, at least in the West. He just he was in Wisconsin, Madison, Wisconsin, and he died at the age of 92 on Thursday. Geshe Sopa, a great realized being. So, so someone from the center, Paul, he approached me and he said he is going tomorrow. He's driving tomorrow to Madison for whenever they do the cremation, which is not clear yet because he's in the state of clear light still. So, so if you want to go with him, here's the number in case you're interested. It's 919-537-2021. I thought I'd mention that before I forget, or you can ask me later and I can give you the number again. Okay. So when they asked me to do this week's session, I was wondering, well, what should I do, right? And so what I thought of is that I live in Carborough, and there's a small group that I lead there once a week. And they're mainly newcomers who come to it, university, because I live very close to UNC, so university students, and some other people who are older but still new to Buddhism. And so one person asked me last week, okay, so we talk so much about Buddhism and so forth and so on, but what do you really do, right? What do you really do? I mean, what does it really mean? And I thought about it a little bit because it was interesting, because I have that same question sometimes, like what I'm doing, what difference is it making, right? And also, we have these, we come to teachings, we do these practices, we do these prayers, we do all these different things, right? Or maybe we have commitments. Some of us have commitments that we have to keep throughout our lives because our teachers have given us certain practices to do. So and some of them are difficult, some of them not so difficult. But in any case, so the question, so what does it all boil down to, right? And so I went back to, I was reading this. So, and one of my commitments, since we're talking about commitments, with Rinpoche, Lama Zopa Rinpoche gave me a commitment many years ago to read the Diamond Cutter Sutra every day, right? So I have to read the Diamond Cutter Sutra every day for the rest of my life, essentially. And so in there, it says, and this is now His Holiness's book, where he actually quotes the Diamond Cutter Sutra, right? Where the Buddha basically says what the Dharma boils down to, right? In 3 simple sentences, phrases. He says, abandon evil doing, practice virtue well, subdue your mind. That is Buddha. This is the Buddha's teaching, right? Abandon evil doing, practice virtue well, subdue your mind. This is the Buddha's teaching. And so everything that we do, all our prayers, all our rituals, all our practices, all our meditations, all our going to the teachings, if everything, all that stuff, right, is to essentially at the end boils down to that, right? It's basically an implementation, right? So whatever practices we're doing, the prayers we're doing, is essentially at the end of the day, it's to bring us to our final goal, right, of enlightenment in Buddhism. And it's essentially to, and so those are the 3 things we have to do at all times in our lives. Everything else is just extra stuff, right? And it's interesting, those three things are not necessarily that particularly unique to Buddhism, right? I mean, if abandon evil doing, practice virtue well, subdue your mind, right? Those are in other traditions as well. So Buddhism is just one approach, if you could argue, right? And so then, so if we can do that, then we are well and truly on the path, and well and truly um, really working towards our liberation. And so I guess the question is, what is our final goal? Right? So different traditions say different things. I don't know that much about Christianity or Islam or so forth and so on. I grew up a Hindu, and then early in my 20s, I became a Buddhist. And so, in Buddhism, our goal is to achieve enlightenment, right? Achieve liberation, where we are um, transcend our suffering, if you will, right? Where we no longer we are in that state of ultimate happiness. And not just we are in a state of ultimate happiness, we are able to help others to be in a state of ultimate happiness, right? That is the goal of the Buddhist path, right? And so then the Buddha talks about, so that's what he talks about in the Four Noble Truths, right? His first teaching, the first turning of the wheel of the Dharma, where he talks, he talks about the truth of suffering, the truth of the cessation of sorry, yeah, that's right, truth of suffering, the truth of the cause of suffering, then the truth of the cessation of suffering, and finally, truth of the path of suffering. And the path being that he elaborates on it with the eightfold path of right speech, right conduct, right wisdom, right livelihood, and the other rights, right? So so when we think about so if we take out those three things one at a time, right? Abandon evil doing. So so virtue, or rather abandoning non-virtue or ethical behavior, right? It's the fundamental basis on what on in Buddhism, right? Everything else that we do has to have that as the basis. That's what the Buddha said, right? So, and and you could ask, why? Why practice virtue, or rather, why abandon non-virtue? Why not? Why not just keep on autopilot, right? What is so special about practicing, abandoning non-virtue? And so you could think of many different things, about karma, you could think about karma and so forth and so on. But one of the things I think about is that, to do anything in our lives, right, we have to have clarity of mind, right? So if you think about when we went to college, to study, we have to be able to concentrate. To concentrate, we have to have some amount of clarity, some amount of space, right? Or if we're working in our jobs, if we've had a turbulent day at home or whatever, and we have thoughts churning through our minds, we're not really able to concentrate, right? We're not really able to think about what we're doing. So we have to have a sense of clarity in our minds. So non-virtue basically is that it creates extra stuff for us, right? Even if we're on the Buddhist path, even if we do our prayers, even if we do our rituals, even if we do all these things, keep our commitments, everything, but we're not really doing the basic work of, keeping morality, then we are essentially creating extra obstacles in our way, right? That's basically what it comes down to. And they use the analogy um, of the, the um, creating seeds. I mean, rather creating planting a garden, right? So you plant a garden by sowing. You have to first fertilize the soil. You first get decent soil, then you fertilize the soil, then or maybe before that, you rake it to get the rocks out and so forth and so on. You fertilize the soil, then you put the seeds in, and then you put water. You water it, and you make sure it gets sunshine and all that stuff, right? So that's how a garden grows, right? If any one of those things is missing, it's not going to grow, right? So for us, if we are continually creating, engaging in non-virtuous actions, right? We're essentially creating more and more negative energy in our minds. We're putting more rocks into our garden, essentially, right? We're basically leaching away the soil, the chemicals or whatever, the good stuff, the nutrients in the soil, right? We're just creating more and more obstacles in our way. And so out of all that negative energy, because whenever we're doing negative things, we're creating negative energy. How you want to look at it with karma and so forth and so on, it's okay. It's up to you. But still, we're creating negative energy in our minds, right? So we're not going to have that clarity. So in this case, we need the clarity to be able to be on the spiritual path, to reach to have some semblance of happiness, right? So we can't bring happiness if we're continually creating suffering for others. I mean, that's what unethical behavior is, actually. It's just creating suffering for others, right? The Buddhist definition. If you think about what constitutes ethical behavior, killing, stealing, or the three of body, the four of speech, and three of mind, right? So all those things: killing, stealing, lying, malice, sexual misconduct, and so forth and so on. All those things are essentially creating suffering for others, which in turn creates negative energy in our mind stream, right? So that's why abandoning evil doing is the first thing that shows up. Without it, everything else becomes immaterial, right? I guess that's relatively simple. I think we can understand that. And then it says practice virtue well, right? So practicing virtue is like the putting the fertilizer in, right? So again, not engaging in negative behavior is like removing the rocks and so all that stuff, right? But practicing virtue is like, well, sowing the seeds, right? Because from our seeds, the Buddha, short digression here, but the Buddha basically talked about karma, right? The idea of positive behavior results. Positive behavior brings about positive results. Negative behavior brings about negative results, right? And he presented it not, he just presented it as a natural law, right? Nobody's punishing us. There's no being who's judging us whenever we do negative things and says, aha, this is going to happen to you next time, right? There's no one like that. So we basically create the seeds, or we create the seeds for our results, right? And it's a natural law, like gravity is a natural law. Newton's first law is a natural law, so forth and so on, right? And it doesn't matter whether we're Buddhist or Christian or Hindu. It doesn't matter whether we're here on Earth or whether we're someplace else in the universe, or however many other universes there are. It's immaterial, right? So it's basically the same way everywhere we go. So that's what he said. And so if we want to bring about any positive results, we have to create positive seeds, like the garden. And to create positive seeds, we have to practice virtue. And Um, so that's relatively easy to understand too, right? I mean, if we believe in law of cause and effect, that seems to be relatively easy to understand. And even in this life, we can see that, right? If we behave well with others, others behave well with us, our relationships are better, our lives are better, like that, right? Sometimes it's not clear, even if we do things that we do positive things, it's not always true that positive things happen to us, right? I mean, there's not a direct relationship that we can see, right? But we don't, you know, they say that how it works is it's not necessarily going to come to fruition in this life, right? So the results that we see in this life are not necessarily the results that we've created. Causes, let me start over. The results we see in this life are not necessarily due to causes that we've created in this life, right? So that's why there's not that direct, we don't see it, right? Because we don't have that omniscience or whatever to see how it all works, right? But it does. So that's why practicing virtue shows up. But it's interestingly, the Buddha doesn't say practice virtue. He says abandon evil doing. He doesn't just say practice virtue, right? He says practice virtue well, right? There's that extra word he adds in there. And so that's the interesting bit, right? Is that what does it mean to practice virtue well? And I was looking, and so we can practice virtue, but we can, like we can give, right? We can be generous, let's say, we can give, but we can give with a negative attitude, right? We can give because we want to feel better about ourselves. We want to give because we want to put down the other person in some way, right? By showing that we are better than them, right? There are things like that. There are many, the same action, right? But it's not positive or negative because of the action itself, right? It's positive or negative because of our attitude, right? Our motivation. I mean, that's what the Buddhist teachings say, right? So that's why the well part is there, because what he's trying to say is we have to actually have that attitude behind it. The attitude, what is that attitude, right? And so the attitude has to be of benefiting not just ourselves, making us feel better, but it has to be of benefiting others, right? That's how we can rise above our own, I don't know, soap opera, I guess, right? Because each of us each of us in his or her own little soap opera, right? We have our lives. We have us. We have blinders on. We see only our lives. We don't see others really, or others are the effect of our actions on others, or even um, just others how what their lives are like, because we don't really spend much time on it, right? If they're not within our inner circle of friends or relatives, we don't really care all that much, right? So, um, so the attitude he talks about is this attitude of always being of benefit to others, right? And it's an attitude that is really, it has incredible power. Even if we do just simple things, right? I mean, we don't have to be like Mother Teresa. I mean, very few of us can be like Mother Teresa, right? She was a great bodhisattva, or but most of us aren't there yet, right? And I bring her up because I grew up in Calcutta. The school I went to was affiliated with a charity and so forth and so on, right? So it was a benefactor of our charity. So I knew that, I didn't know her, but I knew of their works, very well. And so it's, so she was an amazing being. But we can do things, very little things in our lives that just is just brings, just we can do little things that basically become that flower like that, right? Mother Teresa didn't become Mother Teresa just like that, right? She didn't show up in this world suddenly and then just, yep, okay, I'm going to take care of all the people that nobody takes care of, right? She did little things. She watered her seed, put little seeds in the garden, just like we are, watered it and so forth and so on, right? And then it came to fruition like that, right? So that's the potential that we can also achieve, right? But we have to take little steps. And that's why Rinpoche, for example, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, from whom many of you know, who is for many of us, our primary teacher. And he gives this advice to everyone, right? Is that, whatever, everything that we do, right? Whether we say it, whether we do it with our body or we think it, right? Everything that we do, we have to continuously think of how is it benefiting others? How is it benefiting another person? Because if we do that, then automatically it will become positive. It's impossible to do something negative if we are thinking about benefiting others, right? But on top of that, we create this incredible um, each action has an incredible power, right? It's not just the action itself. It has this force of that mind behind it, right? It becomes like every ordinary action, he says, becomes an extraordinary action, right? And so whatever we do, so he has this whole book about, like, how to think like that, right? With every action, how to think, what to think. But basically, he said he gives the advice he gives to each of his students is that when you get up in the morning, there's two things you think, right? The first thing before you even get up. So for those of us who've been around for a long time, this has become like automatic now, right? So for me, like I'm not even out of bed, but I just think I'm half asleep. I'm still thinking this. I'm not sure how much benefit it really has when you're half asleep. But in any case, so the first thing he says to think is how wonderful I have another day, right? When you think about it, it's not a guarantee that we're going to have another day, right? So how wonderful that we have another day. So that's the first thing, right? And then the second thing he says to think is, whatever I do, may it be of benefit to others, right? So we set that basic motivation that it's that ground, right? It's that the ground it's that fertile ground, right? Because if you don't have fertile ground, no matter how much seeds you put in there, no matter how much water you put in there, nothing's gonna sprout, right? Or thrive. So that motivation, if we have that thought in the beginning of the day, even if we mess up during the day, which we will because we're human beings, right? But we create that fertile ground because we create the cause for something to grow. And that's why it's so profound. So what that means is during the day when we are, whatever actions we're taking in our little soap operas becomes an extraordinary action because we have that in the back of our minds. Because if we, especially if we're able to remind ourselves to be of benefit, right, during the day, right, during our actions, right. But if we don't have that motivation, then it becomes very, very difficult to, for that garden to grow, right? So that's why he says, always think like that in the morning. And of course, and so for those of you who've been around, you know about accumulation of merit and accumulation of, and so that's where the accumulation of merit comes from, right? Again, accumulation of merit is nothing special. It's that garden again, right? To create the seeds create the soil and the fertilizer and all that stuff for the garden. So So that's the, and in fact, actually, I was thinking about this. And somebody asked me yesterday, um, somebody asked me yesterday, if you have all this karma and all this other stuff, and you created all this bad karma, that, all this, and you're gonna, and it says karma, if you remember the Lamrim, it says karma is definite, right? It's definitely gonna ripen, right? Whatever karma we create, whether negative or positive, right? So the fact that we're here is ripening of positive karma. The fact we have human lives, that we live in a country that's, that's wonderful, and we have roofs over our head, and enough to feed ourselves, and so forth and so on, right? So incredible karma we've created, positive karma. So that's, so um, the person would ask me, so if you've created all, if let's say you've created all this negative karma, then, and it's going to come to fruition, then what's the point? Right? Why am I even striving? Why bother? Right? And this person isn't Buddhist, but she's interested in it, and so, talking about purification, so those, some of you know about purification, where you can purify negative karma that we may have created in the past. So that's not of, if I thought, well, if I go into that, it's not helpful, particularly helpful, right? Because the person isn't going to necessarily engage in purification practices, right? So then I thought something that I had heard, so then I thought about what it says in Lamrim, which is that, if you have this attitude of bodhicitta, the attitude of benefiting others at all times, right? Because that's the attitude the bodhisattvas and the Buddhas have, right? At all times, whatever they're doing, right? They're only thinking of benefiting others. However that might be, right? It might be little actions or big actions, right? And so, and it says in there, what potential that has, the power it has of this, just that motivation, right, that we're talking about. And so I looked it up in Geshe Sopa, who just passed away, his commentary, right? And here's what he says, and it's really amazing, right? So it says bodhicitta, this attitude, also burns up enormous amounts of negative karma in an instant. It is a powerful purification because it is the very opposite of harmful action. All negative actions involve harming others. Out of attachment and selfishness, we become angry with others, take their lives, hurt them, steal their property, cheat them, lie to them, and so on. Negative karma, like deliberately killing your parents and so forth and so on, has consequences that are long-lasting and deep-seated obstacles to emancipation. What could overcome this hindrance other than vowing to take the responsibility to eliminate other suffering? When a desire purely to benefit all others, not just your relatives and friends, is spontaneous, everything you do creates great merit and destroys prior negative actions. Not only that, bodhicitta causes small merits created in the past to become enormous, merit that had degenerated to become never-ending, and large merits to become inexhaustible. Right? So this attitude, we may think that it's a simple little thing, right? That we make, those of us who do food offering prayers, for example, before we eat, we have this prayer that we do that to benefit others. May this food be of nourishment not just to myself, right? I'm not feeding myself just to keep my body going, but so that it may be of benefit to someone else, right? And so forth and so on, like that. All the things that we do, if we have that motivation, that's the kind of result it brings, right? So we may think it's little, but all those little actions make a huge difference. That's the thing that we don't understand, right? I mean, or we may read and make sense to us, but we don't really understand, right? I don't know about you, but that's true for me, right? So that's why practicing virtue well is so important, right? With the right attitude. And then finally, it says, subdue your mind, right? And that's, it's so, when we think about, um, if you lie down on the ground and you look up at the sky and somebody says, describe what you see, what we say are, I see these clouds, they're up there, it looks like this, the shape, and, it's going to rain, or so forth and so on, right? Like that. What we don't see is the blue sky. What we don't notice is the sky itself, right? And so our minds, they say, is like that blue sky, right? The nature of our mind is like that blue sky. It's absolutely clear. It's pristine. All potential, all things can rise from it. All good things can rise from it, right? It's like that blue sky. The clouds are just the things that are in the way, right? Things we have picked up, things that come and things that go, right? That's just in our way. So it says, for example, in the scriptures, it says, qualities are innate, stains are adventitious, right? So the qualities is like the sky. Each of us has the Buddha potential, the seed to become Buddhas, right? So that's the beauty of it. Each of us, sooner or later, has the potential to become a Buddha or will become a Buddha. But we have clouds that kind of are in our way. Once in a while, we see this sky through the clouds, but most often we just see only the clouds. But the good news is that the clouds are adventitious, right? They're not, yeah, the stains are adventitious. So the clouds are they're not part of the sky, right? It's not like the stain on a cloth that won't come off, right? So the clouds so whatever we're going through right now is temporary, right? Whatever negative emotion we're feeling is temporary. Whatever difficulty we're going through is temporary. Whatever feelings of badness, etc., we have are also temporary. They're not us, right? They're not who we are. And so that's the beauty of it, that we can become the blue sky, right? And the way to become the blue sky is subduing our mind, right? Subduing our mind means to rise above, to transcend, right? And to rise above the little soap operas that we have where we're only thinking of ourselves, right? So the Buddha said that the root of all of our clouds or all our suffering, all our obstacles, etc., is the self-cherishing nature that we have. We only think of our own little selves, right? And so if we can rise above that, if we can realize the great, if we are able to conquer that, right, then everything is possible. And so that's what subduing our mind means, to basically it's also, the word is also pacification, right? And to not, so what happens is we don't have these constant barrage of, envy and jealousy and anger and, oh, I don't know, pick all the other things that happen, right? I mean, we all know what comes up, right? So that's what we can be if we are able to rise above the self-cherishing, right? And that's where, there's all those great teachings on wisdom, right, that the Buddha talked about, how to generate wisdom, and that's another big topic. But essentially, it's basically to letting go of the ego, right? Letting go of this holding on to this view of our self that we have. So basically, then what that means is, we're almost out of time, but basically what that means is, Buddhism isn't difficult. I mean, what the difficulty is in mm, doing something different than what we've been doing. That's where the difficulty lies, right? But what we have to do, things we have to do aren't difficult. They're not strange, esoteric things that we have to do, practices, rituals, all these things, right? They're there to help us, but that's not the final, that's not the main dish, if you will, right? The main dish, what the basic thing is to essentially abandon evil doing, practice virtue well, and subduing our minds, right? If we can do those three things, all the other stuff is just, it just happens automatically. And yeah, so that, so that's all I had to say. So if you have any questions or anything, you can ask me, or I'll try to answer. Or there are others here who are even more qualified than me, or more qualified, not even more, just more qualified than me. Uh, so you can ask anything you like. Is there a? Did you want to ask use the mic? Yeah, we have to be do it all the.
So everybody can hear.
Yes.
Um, there's that saying that they said that you need to love yourself or take care of yourself first to
Yes.
be able to
Help others.
help others. And in the way to be kind to yourself as well. So that won't be when you said that you have to always look at the person first, the other to help others. But if you don't start with yourself, how are you going to be doing that?
That's a really good
It's kind
point.
of like,
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a really good point. It is absolutely true. So I wasn't trying to say that, we should only think about others by sacrificing ourselves. Um, but it also says in the teachings that you actually, I don't know if it says in the teaching, but I know my teachers have said this, which is that if you're not able to be of help yourself, you're incapable of helping someone else. Because if you think about it, you know, if we can't generate compassion for ourselves, if we can't see our own foibles, if we can't see our own faults, and if we're not able to be at peace with it, right? We can't be kind to others, right? We can't see other people, we can't see other people's faults and their natures and still feel compassion, right? Because only through our own experience can we actually see how others are, right? And so like that, right? We have to. So that's one of the things that I remember one of the first, for those of you who know the practice of giving and taking Tonglen, right? Where you basically, you think about others and you generate the love, in the form of the visualization that sort of like white light and so forth, and you feel you send love to others, right? So he actually started with love to ourselves first. So he said, before you do all, you think about, those of you who know, you think about, you have the circle where you have your loved one, your friends, and then your people, your acquaintances, and then finally your enemies, right? And the rest of, all that. So, so he started with the fourth circle first, which was oneself, right? So you send the kindness and the love to yourself first. So we have to have that. Without it, we can't have a solid ground from which to actually, be of benefit, right? So I'm glad you brought it up. Thank you. Yeah, that's definitely true. Yes, Andre. Don't sit down, Chris.
I find that the people that I work with in prison and stuff like that, it's like for them, and I think probably for all of us. I know for myself, uh, I get like like abandoning evil, and and I get
Practice virtue.
practice virtues, subduing the mind. But for me and for the guys that I work with in prison, why? You know, that's the question. Like,
Yeah.
why should I do that? And so for myself, as I started practicing this path and decided for myself, I thought, well, like enlightenment is the goal, right? But then understanding what enlightenment is a whole nother thing. So when the Dalai Lama said, like, becoming a better human being,
Yeah.
that made like perfect sense for me. If I want to become a better human being, then I want to be able to do those three, you know.
Yeah.
And so I find that once these guys understand that, oh, all I got to do is just become a better person, you know. You know, I think I can do that. I can work. I want to do that. I want to be that, you know. And so then they begin to start just automatically, right? You start doing the thing, stop doing the things that you know aren't beneficial, things that we label as evil or bad and stuff like that. You just stop doing those kinds of things. You begin to start practicing virtue, right? And then you begin to really observe your mind, and you really begin to work on eliminating those negative thoughts that cause you to do negative things.
Yeah.
So I
No,
just
it's
wanted to
true.
share that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. One of my teachers once said, well, if because somebody asked that question, why bother, right? And he said, well, look at where you are today. Look at your mind today. You haven't done anything yet, so has that helped you? How has that helped you, right? So you think about it like that, right? I mean, okay, maybe that's why one should bother, right? Is if you don't want the same things continuously, which is a flip of what, yeah, it's the other side of what you were saying. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I was just I saw, I think it was a quote that was saying about, it was a question to Dalai Lama that he said, what did you gain from meditation? And he said, nothing. But I will tell you what I lost. I lost depression, anxiety, hatred, and resentment. So,
Yeah.
and so on, so on.
Hmm. Yeah. Oh,
I go back to the why. And when I started, my mind was really contaminated. And so the why to me just, I wasn't feasible to even see the good in anything. And I had to take a leap of faith in a way, or trust that these practices would calm my mind, and then I would see the other side of the goodness. And I did take that trust and that faith, and it helped me to now all of a sudden I see the good things. I wasn't seeing them. The blinders were on, all the bad things were out there. So why? Why do I want to see more of the bad things is what I kept thinking. But as I took that leap of faith and trust, I noticed that it started clearing off that that big huge smudge on my wall or the sky, and clearing some of the clouds, and I was able to see the good stuff. So I think in some way when people say why, we've had all this contamination, and sometimes you might have to throw in a little bit of that Christianity thought, which is where I came from originally, and just take that leap of faith if you need to really change your life and it's not going anywhere and it's not helping. Sometimes it needs some faith.
yeah. And a lot of times, once we have a little bit of, we see a little bit of improvement. I don't know what the word is, but we see the sky through the clouds a little bit. We get a glimpse of the sky. We get the sense of confidence that we can actually, it can be real. It can be, because most of the time we feel like it's so far away, right? The whole idea of Buddhahood, etc., is so far away, it's just unattainable, right? So I think I suffer from this, this lack of self-confidence, right? That we can do it, right? So the difficulty is that we have to persevere until we see it a little bit, right? And you see it a little bit, and then you see it a little bit more, and then you see it a little bit more, like that, right? And every glimpse that one gets, we realize that, wow, this is actually possible, you know. And maybe we can't. It's not possible in this lifetime. That's okay. Like one of my teachers said, he just said, well, this is just one lifetime. You've got many more to go. So just keep making progress in every little way, right? Every day, every second, every minute, every day, every week, every month, every life, like that. And we just have to keep putting one step forward. So anyway, wow, I'm late. So let's finish up. If there are no more questions, comments, okay. By doing the prayers on the pink sheet, and if you could hold, if you could hold Geshe-Sopa in your heart, that may he return among us and continue to help us and guide us. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness, and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid, and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All-powerful Chenrezig Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. Savior of the snowland teachings and transmigratory beings, who extensively clarifies the path that unifies emptiness and compassion. To the lotus in the hand, Lord Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be fulfilled. The one who mastered his speech at a very young age, the one with great patience who received the name Avatare, the one with great precision who spread the teachings of Lama Tsongkhapa on bliss and void, Lama ornament of the yellow hat tradition, please remain until samsara ends. You who uphold the subduer's moral way, who serve as a bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplished magnificent prayers honoring the three jewels, Savior of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long. And we'll do 7 Tara mantras for Geshe-la's safe travels and long, happy life. Tare tu re so ha, om tare tu re so ha. 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 Thank you very much. Have a good weekend.